the river that took, and the river that gave back. The wind howled like a wounded beast through the pine trees, carrying with it the biting sting of snow that danced violently across the frozen riverbank. In the heart of the Cascade Wilderness, winter was not just a season, it was a test of survival. Noah Whitaker, 62 and grizzled like the mountains around him, stood at the edge of the river behind his cabin, his breath visible in thick, ghostly clouds. He had lived here for nearly 20 years, off-grid, off-path, and off most people's radars. The kind of man who didn't expect much from life anymore, not after everything he'd lost. The sound of the river was different that morning. Usually, in the dead of winter, the flow beneath the ice was hushed, a dull thrum beneath thick layers of snow-packed silence. But this morning, it bubbled. Muffled. Disturbed. Noah narrowed his eyes. At first, it looked like a clump of blackened branches pressed against the river's jagged edge. But then it moved, just barely, shivering, twitching, clinging to the thin crust of ice like life itself depended on it. And it did. Noah stepped closer, his boots crunching through the snow. The shape became clearer. A bear cub, no larger than a house cat, soaked to the bone, fur-matted with ice, eyes half closed and rimmed with frost. Its tiny chest rose and fell in sharp, irregular breaths. "No," he whispered, as if the cub could hear him. "You're not supposed to be here. Not now. Not alone." Instinct warred with logic. He should leave it. That was the rule in the wild. Nature was nature, you don't interfere unless you have to. And yet, something in the way the cub clung to that icy ledge stopped him cold. Something raw. Something familiar. He remembered another winter. A frozen road. A call that came too late. His wife. Gone in a blink. He'd survived that storm, but barely. And now this cub, this trembling little survivor, was looking at him the same way he'd once looked at the sky. Pleading. Noah dropped to his knees and reached forward, cracking through the crusted snow with his gloves. The ice beneath creaked, groaned, threatening to give way. "Come on, little one. Hold on." The cub tried to move, but failed. Noah stretched further, lying on his stomach now, his hand just grazing the creature's slick fur. One more inch, one more breath, and he had him. With a grunt, Noah yanked the cub free, pulling it against his chest. It didn't fight. It didn't cry. It just lay there, limp and freezing, barely alive. He wrapped it in his thick coat and turned back toward the cabin. Snow fell heavier now, a blinding white veil. His old knees ached with every step, but he pushed forward, heart pounding. The cub weighed almost nothing, but its presence in his arms felt heavy with meaning. Inside, he laid it gently by the fireplace, wrapping it in old flannel blankets and lighting the fire high. He fetched a bowl of lukewarm goat's milk and an eyedropper. Years of solitude had made Noah practical, methodical. But this was different. This was delicate. The cub stirred, its nose twitching slightly at the scent of warmth. A good sign. A fragile thread of hope. Noah sat beside it, cross-legged on the wooden floor, watching the steam curl from its wet fur. "You're not supposed to make it out here," he muttered softly. But then again, neither was I. As the wind howled outside and the fire roared within, something settled quietly in the space between them, something ancient and invisible. Not a man saving a cub. Not a cub fighting for life. But two souls, broken in different ways, meeting on the same edge. And neither of them knew then that this frozen morning would change both of their lives forever. The winter they survived together. For the first 2 days, Noah wasn't sure the cub would survive. Its breathing was shallow. Its fur remained damp, even after hours by the fire. He had to dry it slowly, carefully, warming a towel near the stove before gently pressing it to the little creature's sides. Every time the cub let out the tiniest whimper, a part of Noah's chest caved in. He fed it a mixture of goat's milk and crushed berries, using a small bottle left over from when he had fostered a litter of raccoons years ago. But a bear cub was different. This wasn't a creature meant to be cuddled and tamed. It was wild, or should have been. Yet there it was, lying half-curled in the same flannel blanket Noah had once wrapped around his late wife on stormy nights. On the third morning, the cub opened its eyes fully. Big, round, and dark. It looked up at Noah from the rug in front of the fireplace, blinking slowly, as if trying to decide whether this man with the tired eyes and weathered hands was real. "You made it," Noah whispered, crouching down with a plate of mashed sweet potato and soft-boiled egg yolk, something he read about in an old wildlife guide. Still breathing. Still here. The cub sniffed at the food cautiously, then began to eat, licking with slow determination. That small act, so mundane, so instinctive, nearly brought tears to Noah's eyes. It was the first time he had felt needed in years. He named the cub River. It seemed fitting, not only for where he'd found the little one, but for how it had flowed into his life without warning, cutting through the frozen terrain of his grief. Over the following weeks, a routine settled in. Every morning, Noah would chop wood, feed his goats, and check on River, who had slowly begun exploring the cabin on unsteady legs. By evening, the cub would crawl into the warmest corner near the hearth, curling into a ball of thickening fur, while Noah read aloud from one of his old books. Sometimes he forgot he was reading to a bear. Sometimes, it felt like River was the only one listening. Noah fashioned a makeshift sleeping area near the back entrance, a large wooden crate padded with straw, old blankets, and lined with a thick sheepskin he had saved from his ranching days. River never protested when guided into it at night. There was a calmness to the cub, a quiet understanding that confused and comforted Noah in equal parts. Outside, the winter raged on. Snow piled high around the cabin walls. The river froze completely. The radio warned of record-low temperatures and warned hikers to stay out of the mountains. But inside that little wooden home, a bear cub and an old man learned how to share the silence. One morning, Noah woke to find River at the edge of his bed, sitting on his haunches, watching the window as the snow fell. "You dreaming of the woods, little guy?" Noah asked, rubbing the sleep from his eyes. "You'll go back one day. You belong out there. I know that." River didn't turn. Just stared out, unmoving, thoughtful. As if he understood. By mid-February, the cub had doubled in size. He was strong now. Playful. He'd knock over pans, paw at the firewood, and roll himself into the laundry pile. But he never scratched. Never bit. He followed Noah from room to room, his nails clicking against the hardwood like a dog's, tailless but no less devoted. Noah didn't tell anyone about River. The town was a full hour's drive away, and the few neighbors he had nearby would have called wildlife services. Noah didn't want that. He knew the rules. He also knew River wouldn't have lasted 2 days in a shelter, or out in the wild alone. "He's not a pet," Noah told himself one night, watching the cub sleep near the fire. "He's a guest." But he knew the truth. River had become family. That spring, when the ice melted and the first birds returned, Noah stood on the porch and looked toward the edge of the forest. River sat beside him, taller now, heavier, still a cub, but less baby and more bear. The wind carried the scent of pine and distant rivers. "One day soon," Noah said softly, placing a hand on River's thick fur, "I'll have to let you go." But that day hadn't come yet. And in that moment, just man, bear, and the slow return of sunlight, it felt like maybe it never would. The unspoken bond that winter couldn't break. By March, River was no longer just a bear cub learning how to survive. He had become a daily part of Noah's world. Their bond was no longer about rescue or survival. It was something far deeper. Something sacred. Each morning started the same. As sunlight filtered through the old lace curtains, River would press his wet nose against Noah's bedside, letting out a soft huff to say he was awake. Noah, half groggy, would reach out to pat the thick fur between River's ears, grumbling like an old man used to silence but secretly loving the routine. They ate together, Noah at the table, River lying nearby chewing on a frozen fish or sweet apple slices. On warmer days, Noah would open the cabin door and River would step outside, pausing to glance back, always checking if Noah was coming too. The two would walk through the thinning snow, side by side, an odd pair. An old man with stiff joints, and a young bear with a heavy gait and curious eyes. At first, River needed watching. He'd paw at the goat shed, chase after snowflakes, or try to climb Noah's old tractor. But he was never destructive. In fact, he seemed to understand Noah's voice, not just the tone, but the words themselves. "No," Noah would say calmly, when River got too close to the chicken coop. River would back off, tilt his head, and sit. "Good boy," Noah would mumble, even though he knew that wasn't the right way to speak to a bear. One afternoon, A snowstorm rolled in unexpectedly. The kind that came fast and hit hard. Noah had been chopping wood near the tree when his knee buckled. He slipped, landing awkwardly in the snow, sharp pain shooting through his leg. He tried to get up. Failed. Within seconds, River was there. The cub had grown, strong enough now to nudge Noah upright with his shoulder. He stayed close as Noah limped back to the cabin, growling at the wind as if trying to scare off the storm itself. Inside, Noah collapsed into his chair, breathing heavily. River circled once, then settled by his feet. Protective. Present. That night, as the storm raged, Noah stared into the fire. He wasn't thinking about the pain in his leg. He was thinking about how, in all his years of living alone, nothing had ever watched over him like River just had. The bear wasn't a pet. He wasn't just a rescued animal. He was something else entirely. In town, rumors had started to spread. Someone said they saw a bear's paw prints leading toward Noah's property. Another swore they spotted a giant dog standing at Noah's front door. The postman, who only visited once every 2 weeks, claimed he'd heard growling when he dropped off a package and had chosen not to investigate. Noah ignored the talk. He didn't need the town's opinion. He wasn't hiding River out of fear. He was protecting him, from people who wouldn't understand, who would see a wild animal instead of a soul. Besides, Noah liked the solitude. He had grown used to it after losing his wife, after the silence settled in. But River changed the texture of that silence. It was no longer hollow, it was warm. Evenings became their sacred time. Noah would light a fire, pull out an old book, and sit by the hearth. River would curl beside him, his massive head resting on his paws, breathing in rhythm with the crackling flames. Sometimes, Noah would speak. Not about anything important, just memories. Stories of how he met his wife, or the time he got lost in the Rockies for 3 days, or the jokes his students used to tell when he was still a science teacher. River never interrupted. He just listened. And in that, Noah found healing. By the end of spring, River had grown too big for the cabin. He no longer fit under the table. When he stood on his hind legs, he could look Noah in the eyes. The walls of the laundry room creaked when he turned in his sleep, and the blankets barely covered his body anymore. Noah knew the time was coming. The day when River would feel the pull of the forest, of the wild. Bears weren't meant to live in cabins. But neither of them spoke about it. Because every morning still brought soft huffs and cold noses. And every evening still brought firelight and silence that didn't feel empty. For now, that was enough. One quiet morning changed everything. It was a morning like any other. The sun peeked through frost-laced branches. Snowmelt trickled from the eaves of the cabin. Birds chirped cautiously, signaling the slow return of spring. Noah opened the door, half expecting to find River sprawled across the porch, snoring softly, as he often did. But the porch was empty. No grumpy bear today. Noah joked to himself as he stepped outside and scanned the clearing. No paw prints. No broken branches. No lingering warmth where River usually slept. Just cold, untouched snow. A knot formed in Noah's chest. He clutched his coat tighter and whistled, a low, steady sound that River always responded to. Nothing. He walked to the edge of the clearing, called River's name again. Then again. Louder. The only reply was the distant cry of a raven, echoing from somewhere deep in the forest. He waited all day. Every hour, he returned to the edge of the trees. He left pieces of fruit and fish near the porch. He even warmed up the stew River liked most, just in case the scent would draw him back. By sundown, the unease turned into something colder than snow. Panic. The first night was sleepless. Noah sat up by the window, the fire behind him long since turned to embers. He replayed everything from the day before. River had been healthy, energetic, playful. Nothing had seemed unusual. He hadn't wandered too far in weeks. Even when he did, he always came back by dusk. Always. The second morning brought false hope. Tracks in the snow. Deep, heavy prints. But they weren't River's. Too large. Too wide. Likely an older male bear passing through. Noah knew the danger that posed, especially for a younger, still-growing bear like River. He tried to brush it away, but the thought of River confronting a dominant male out there alone made his hand shake. The forest was vast. Noah knew every inch of it, but it didn't matter. Nature followed its own rules. By the third day, people in town started to notice. Sheriff Mayfield stopped by to drop off some paperwork and found Noah scanning the tree line with binoculars. "You all right out here, Noah?" "Bear's gone." The sheriff raised an eyebrow. "That the one folks said was hanging around here?" Noah didn't answer. Instead, he pointed to the half-eaten apple on the porch, River's favorite, untouched for days. "Maybe he wandered off. Getting older. It's spring, mating season." He'd raised River since he was a pup. He knew his patterns. He knew his heart. And something felt off, terribly off. On the fifth day, a storm rolled in. The sky darkened without warning. Heavy winds screamed through the trees. Snow returned with a vengeance, covering everything in a thick, angry white. Noah stood outside, snow lashing his face, calling River's name again and again, until his voice cracked and his knees buckled. He dropped to the ground, whispering into the snow, "Where are you, boy?" For the first time since his wife's funeral, Noah wept. Days turned to a week. Then 2. No signs. No tracks. No trace. The forest, once comforting and familiar, now loomed like a silent enemy. The emptiness around the cabin swallowed Noah whole. He stopped eating much. Stopped reading. Stopped speaking aloud, because there was no one left to listen. River was gone. And in that absence, the silence became unbearable again. Just like before. Just like when his wife had left this earth, without warning, without goodbye. But Noah didn't give up completely. Every night, he left the porch light on. Every morning, he put out fresh food at the clearing's edge. Because hope, even when bruised and bleeding, still lived in Noah's chest. And somewhere deep in the woods, he believed River was still listening. What the forest was hiding. By the 12th day, something shifted in Noah. The quiet no longer felt passive, it felt wrong. As if the forest itself was hiding something. Watching him. Waiting. He strapped on his snow boots, packed a rucksack with jerky, river fish, and apples, and stepped into the woods. He wasn't sure what he expected to find. He just knew he couldn't sit still anymore. He retraced every path River had ever taken, down to the glacial spring near Pine Hollow, the berry thickets by Birch Rock, the narrow stream where River liked to slap fish with his paws. There were no signs of struggle. No tufts of fur. No blood. No paw prints. But at the riverbank, where he had first found the bear cub shivering years ago, Noah noticed something. Broken branches. A trail of crushed snow leading away from the water. He knelt and examined the markings carefully. Whatever passed here had been large and limping. A paw drag. His heart thudded. River? 4 hours, he followed the barely there trail. The sun hung low in the sky by the time he reached the old abandoned ranger's cabin, long forgotten, half swallowed by vines and snow. He stepped inside. It was dark, quiet, but the floor was disturbed. Scratches. Straw. Claw marks. And then he saw it, in the corner, a mess of fur and shadow. At first he thought it was River. But it wasn't. A different bear. Younger. Smaller. And injured, its leg clearly bent at a strange angle. It growled weakly when Noah stepped closer, but didn't move. Noah whispered softly, "Easy. I'm not here to hurt you." It wasn't River. But it meant something. A second cub? A sibling? Was this the secret? As he backed out of the cabin, unsure what to do next, something made him freeze. Movement, behind the trees. Heavy. Slow. Deliberate. He turned. And there, half emerged from the thicket, was River. Bigger. Bulkier. Older. His fur matted with snow. One eye narrowed by a fresh gash. But unmistakably him. "No," Noah breathed. "It's really you." River didn't rush. He didn't roar. He simply stared at Noah with a look so human, so familiar, it shattered every remaining doubt. Then River turned, and looked at the cabin behind Noah. Then back at Noah. That's when it clicked. River hadn't been missing. He had been guarding. Noah followed River's gaze again. The injured bear inside wasn't random. It was family. The pieces started coming together. River had vanished because he had found another cub, one not strong enough to survive alone. He had returned to the very place where he was once saved, trying to do the same for someone else. It wasn't instinct. It was learned. It was love. And River had kept vigil hidden, protecting the wounded cub, just as Noah had once done for him. Noah stepped inside again and knelt beside the young bear, heart pounding. He reached into his rucksack and slowly offered food. The cub sniffed, then ate, ravenously. River stood outside the door, his massive body silhouetted in the snow, watching. Waiting. That night, Noah built a fire inside the ranger cabin. He laid blankets. Bandaged the cub's leg with supplies he had carried out of habit. River paced outside, occasionally grunting low and deep, never once entering. It was clear. He remembered the rules Noah had once set: don't enter human shelters. Don't grow too comfortable. But tonight, River made an exception. He took one step into the doorway. Just enough to look at the cub. Just enough to nudge the injured bear with his nose. Then he looked at Noah. Their eyes met, old man and grown bear. And Noah finally understood the truth. River hadn't left him. He had gone to become him. In the following days, Noah returned again and again to care for the cub. With River's quiet supervision, the young bear began to heal. Noah never found where the bear had come from. No obvious signs of a mother. No den nearby. Maybe orphaned. Maybe abandoned. But no longer alone. And though River still refused to come back to the cabin, he remained near, always a shadow between trees. A low grunt from the ridge. A pawprint in the mud outside the garden. The bond hadn't broken. It had simply evolved. Some bonds never break. They just find new forms. Spring rolled in quietly, melting the ice from the riverbanks and loosening the grip winter had held for months. Buds returned to the trees, the snowdrifts shrank, and birdsong once again filled the crisp mountain air. But what filled Noah's heart the most was the sound of distant, padded footsteps and the occasional low, familiar grunt from the woods. River had not disappeared again. He had simply become a guardian. Noah continued visiting the ranger's cabin, where the young cub, whom he had named Echo, was now walking on his healing leg. The bruises and tremors that once marked him had faded. In their place grew curiosity and strength. Echo would sniff Noah's backpack, tug on his gloves, climb awkwardly over his legs as if mistaking him for a rock. All under the watchful gaze of River, never far, never intrusive. River had become what Noah once was, a protector, a silent guide, a surrogate parent. And that realization, day by day, softened something in Noah's heart that had long been sealed shut. One bright morning, Noah opened the cabin door and found something on his porch. Not left by River, but about him. 3 claw marks. Neatly scratched across a fallen log. Parallel. Deliberate. Almost like a message. He smiled. It wasn't random. It was recognition. River was still communicating, still remembering. Not as a pet. Not as an animal trained to respond to human kindness. But as someone who chose to return. Because he understood. Weeks passed, and Echo grew stronger. One day, Noah arrived at the ranger cabin and found it empty. No moaning. No heavy breathing. No bear, not limping. Not afraid. Running. Echo stumbled playfully over River's feet, trying to nip at his ears. River swatted gently at him, never forceful, guiding, correcting, teaching. Noah stood frozen as he watched them wrestle in the clearing, 2 silhouettes painted in gold by the morning sun. The teacher had become the student. The cub had become the protector. And somewhere in that chain, Noah realized, his own place had never disappeared. He was part of something much bigger now. That night, River approached the cabin. Not just to the tree line. To the door. And when Noah opened it, River didn't wait for food, didn't look for comfort. He simply nudged his head gently against Noah's shoulder and stood there. Noah, breath caught, placed his hand on the great bear's back. "I missed you too, old boy," he whispered. River let out a low huff, content, almost smiling, then turned and disappeared again into the trees. But not before Echo peeked out from the woods and gave a little chuff of his own, then bounded after River into the brush. It was the last time Noah saw them up close. And yet, somehow, he never felt more connected. Summer warmed the valley, and the forest bloomed again. Noah's garden was alive with color. His cabin window now bore muddy pawprints along the sill, reminders that River still visited, even if unseen. Sometimes at dawn, he would spot two bears on the far ridge, one large, steady, and powerful, the other smaller, livelier, clumsier. And when it rained, the same 3 claw marks would sometimes reappear on a fresh log near his porch. Like a signature. A reminder. A promise. One morning, after a storm, Noah found something new. At the edge of the clearing, a trail of paw prints, 3 different sizes. His breath caught in his chest. 3. River. Echo. And a new one. Had Echo found someone of his own? Was the story continuing, even further? Tears welled in Noah's eyes, not from sadness, but from a joy that felt so deep, it wrapped around his very bones. He sat on the porch, held his mug of warm tea, and looked out at the woods. "Good boy, River," he said to the trees. "You did it." And then softly, as if echoing back through the rustling leaves, came a sound, a low, contented grunt. Noah never claimed to own River. He never called him back. Never tried to cage the wildness that had made him who he was. But he had given him love. And River had returned it, not with tricks or obedience, but with loyalty, memory, and protection. Love returned in the most primal, beautiful form. Through presence. Through legacy. Through the bond that no one, not even time, could erase. In the forest, not all goodbyes are endings. Some are just beginnings in a different language.